If you do, they're up here. Again, we have about 50 copies of them. I guess I'm just starting. I'm going to start. Okay, so I'm Leslie Brothers. I'm the director of the McDonough Museum, but I'm also a member of the In-Place Support Group. And thanks to all of you for coming tonight. I hope maybe we get a few more people coming in. It's great to see all of you. We're thrilled. We're so thrilled by the way this project is moving forward and the response we've had. So thanks so much for being here. I just want to go over a couple of deadlines. I'm not going to go through the guidelines. Many of you are aware of them, and you can check them out. And if you have questions after you've looked them through, that's what we're here for tonight, and so much more. So I just want to make sure that everybody's got these dates in their heads. So the next in-place meeting, the third in-place meeting, and actually the last one of this kind, is October 4th. It's a Tuesday again, right here, same time. And the point of that meeting is just to further your progression with your projects. You know, as you get deeper into planning and putting your proposals together and more questions come up, you know, you're absolutely welcome and encouraged to use the email address on the website to communicate with us. We also have given you the McDonough Museum's number, the 941-1400 number. And there's usually somebody answering that phone, and they'll take a message or leave a message, and we'll make sure that we get back to you and answer your questions. But that third meeting is a really important one. And the next date is Tuesday, November 1st. Tuesday, November 1st is the deadline for your online submission. And there'll be a form on the website that asks exactly the questions that are identified here in the guidelines. Okay, so what we described, we're looking for in those project proposals, it'll simply be translated into a form. And if you need a paper copy of that, you'll be able to get them at the museum, or we can mail them to you. I mean, just get in touch with us if getting it off the internet is a problem. And we have had people stop in to pick up the pre-registration forms, so I understand sometimes it just makes more sense to have that copy. So we'll make that available to you. So just let us know. Okay, but November 1st, 5 o'clock, that's a firm deadline. We're going to kind of hold everybody to that. Does anybody have any concerns about that right now? Okay. Then we've got about 11 days before the public presentations. And that was intentional. So we wanted to give ourselves time to get back in touch with you with any questions that we have around your proposals, which is why it's absolutely essential that you register. I know many of you pre-registered, and we did that because we needed to know if we were getting the word out, you know, if we were communicating with the public. We needed to know that there was going to be a response, so we had the pre-registration. But registration is absolutely essential. That's the way we're going to find you. So once we get your project submissions, we'll look them over. Any questions we have, we want to be able to get in touch with you to get things clarified so that everybody's as ready as they can be for November 12th. And again, we describe in the guidelines exactly what we're looking for those public presentations. 24 by 36 boards, and actually you can talk a little bit more about DesignWorks and how they'll be available to help everyone out. So Saturday, November 12th, public presentations, and the public will be invited, and they'll also be invited to respond, ask questions, right? So it's more of a sort of full-bodied experience for everyone. You know, it won't be just the support group that's saying. So, am I understanding this correctly? we're really inviting the public to participate in that. Am I forgetting anything? Do you have any questions? Does anybody have any questions just on that stuff? Yeah.
So the presentation, is that the minimum, or are you encouraging everyone to just do the 2 palm boards?
That's all we want. So it's to, I think the way I described it was it's to level the playing field, right? And we want them to be as clear and I guess as comprehensive and understandable as possible. And so we're going to work with you to make sure you've got that. And RJ's going to talk more about that. So if it's like I don't have graphic design skills, or I can't imagine, or so we know we're going to make that possible. So everybody's got sort of the same opportunity. Anybody else have any questions? So RJ's going to talk about the City of You in Place recordings, but he's also maybe just follow up a little bit on DesignWorks and how DesignWorks is going to be a resource for putting together the public presentations. Again, thanks to all of you for being here. I can't wait to hear about your projects, and I think this is just a wonderful thing. So it's great to be a part of it. Thanks.
Okay, hi everybody. A lot of new faces here. It's very exciting. My name is RJ Thompson. I'm an assistant professor of graphic design here at YSU, and I wear a lot of different hats. For those of you that know me, know I'm buzzing around constantly doing something. So at any given time, you may be talking to me about In Place or the City of You campaign or graphic design or God knows what. But I want to address I certainly want to address the design concerns relative to your presentations, but also the in-place recordings, which is number 3 on the agenda. So to start off with the designs, we are asking for 2 24 by 36 boards, designs rather, that totally and completely encapsulate your concept. For whichever site that you've chosen, however your team is built, we're looking for you to articulate those concepts visually. And we do understand that executing these concept boards, in a sense, can be difficult. All right, easier said than done. So my Youngstown DesignWorks program, which is a student-run graphic and interactive design agency, we are actually going to assist with the development of these designs, okay? I have a crew of about 10 students, of whom I can assign 1 to 2 board projects in the coming weeks. So essentially, what you would need to do is this. And bear in mind, you can create this concept board however you like. You don't necessarily have to use a computer. You can get really creative with it, but if you don't use a computer, we would ask that you at least provide some high-resolution file photographs that we can then print out and blow up, and consequently have your concept well executed in the show, as well as the presentations. But if you do decide to design it, you can utilize my students, or you can certainly use your own devices. I'd recommend the Adobe products if you have access to those. If you do not, there are other opportunities. Dare I say this, and my designers in the room are going to shudder when I say it, but if you're at, like, let's say, if you have access to Microsoft Publisher, I know we had a collective heart attack there. If you have access to it, we can't manipulate those files, but if you export that out as a PDF, we can utilize that. If you want to use Microsoft Word, you can. You're kind of limited on your creativity there, though. But again, it is one tool that you have available to you. Again, you can save that out as a PDF. For everyone that is registered, hopefully you received an email blast today. If you did not, then see me later on, I will be sending out the specs on those boards, specifically what we're looking for, so that way you all have them available to you. Two 24 by 36 boards. They'll be mounted on foam core, okay, and we have resources for that. If you need my students' help, what I would ask is for you to bring all of your material, all of your resources, everything that you've concepted together. Bring that together to my students in one nice package. That way we can just take your images, take your drawings, take whatever you bring us, and articulate that into a nice, pleasing composition that works well with the show and your presentations, okay? Considering the timeline, there will be very little margin for error on these designs. If we're designing, let's say, over 60 boards, there's going to be a very particular workflow to this, okay? At the most, you'll get one, maybe at the absolute most, 2 passes for review before we save it out and send it to the printer. So we need to make sure that all of your writing is proper, spelling's good, your illustrations are in a high resolution, as well as your photography, so on and so forth, okay? You will not necessarily have direct contact with me on the development of those boards. You'll likely be interfacing with my students directly. Please understand that I am observing and maintaining the quality of all of the projects. So my goal here is for you to have as highest possible quality deliverable that you can for the exhibition and your presentation, all right? So we won't fail you there. I manage the quality of the work. I can take questions if you have them, but more often than not, you'll be interfacing directly with the students, okay? If there is a technical issue or a concern, or maybe there's an issue with communication, either my students not understanding what you're asking or not receiving prompt responses, then I'll step in and just kind of say, hey, what's going on? And we'll work through it, okay? So my students are really excited to help you with your boards, with your concepts, and please let me know how I can help. But otherwise, I suspect we'll have a lot of really great creative ideas to show. So, any questions on that? Yes?
So you use the word presentation. Are we going to be discussing our boards, or are they standalone? They have to convey everything?
The boards should stand alone. They should act as a substitute for you when you are not present, because they will be in an exhibition eventually.
But we'll be standing next to them to answer questions?
Yeah, I think
They're a presentation tool. So yeah, you'll have the opportunity to present.
Will everybody do it sequentially?
I think we'll put you guys in an order, and I'm not sure what that'll be. I mean, whether it's just alphabetical or I don't know.
It's really relative to the amount of submissions.
Resolved it, but I think everybody, correct me if I'm wrong, but we did make a decision. I think everybody is.
It's here at the bottom of page 10 of the project guidelines. Each team will have 10 minutes to present their project concept and implementation plan with cost, plus 10 minutes for questions and clarifications from the support team.
Gentleman in the back.
Will we be able to use an online presentation also to go with our boards?
Not really. But if you have a really good idea, I can maybe work through that with you. Typically, we want to keep the playing field level. So if you have those tools, great. It may be able to enhance what you're doing, but for the presentations, we want everyone to be on the same playing field.
Okay.
Good question. Anyone else? Okay. Cool. As it pertains to the City of View in-place recordings, for those of you that may not be aware, the City of View is a rebranding and advertising campaign for the City of Youngstown. We've had the opportunity to create a new logo for the city, and soon you'll start seeing it on city utility vehicles. You'll start seeing it on posters promoting all the good work that individuals here are doing in the city. This has been about 1.5 years in the making, and we're so very, very close to launch. The reason why the City of View is here is to act as a communications platform for your projects and the goodwill that it is creating. Aside from being able to create really unique, remarkable, permanent spaces, we want to really harness and capture the conversations that are happening around your projects, because ideally speaking, that's going to inspire someone else to create something just as great as what you're creating. All right, we want to keep this momentum going, the spirit of creation here moving forward. Okay, so the in-place recordings will be a special series of the City of View podcast, which is available on iTunes. Just type in City of View podcast, and there are over 80 different episodes that you can listen to. There's a combination of short form and long form. Short form podcasts, typically 3 minutes in average time. Long form podcasts, however, range half hour, 45 minutes. Okay. What I'm looking to do with each of your teams, not individually necessarily, unless you are acting as an individual with your project, what I'm looking to do is get a long form conversation with you recorded, all right, which fully explores the root of your concept, really everything, how you're going to execute it. We want to know everything as much as we can about your specific intent and execution so that we can archive that and use that in the later exhibition, but also elevate this project locally and regionally, okay? This does mean that there will be some emphasis and attention on your individual projects, okay? On a public level, so we're going to submit this to, well, not submit, but we're going to release it on social media, Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, YouTube, etc., okay? And it's going to generate some buzz behind your projects. One of the questions I frequently get relative to the concepts that people are bringing to me is, well, can we bring in some additional support? Can we reach out to a nonprofit or a for-profit to supplement or support what we're doing, okay? This media that we're generating, this content, can be a really great motivating factor relative to that question. So if you're looking to get some additional funding where possible, you can utilize that effectively, okay? Otherwise, it's going to be used to celebrate this project and ultimately what you all create at the end of the project next summer, okay? So the logistics of this is going to be very interesting because I can't just rapid fire these podcasts. I have to schedule them in such a way that it's practical for you. You might not necessarily have to do a lot of traveling. You may not be able to travel, at which point we can do it over the phone or over the internet. Okay, so before the end of the night here, I'm going to try to go around to each and every one of you and just sort of gauge your interest on this podcast and when we can set up a time to record. Please keep in mind that this is an ongoing thing that will possibly, I want to try to wrap it up before submissions are due in November. Okay. But it very well may extend beyond that relative to your availability and mine. Okay, so I do appreciate patience and interest in the podcast. Also, with the podcast, I will take photos of you. Every person that does a long-form podcast also gets a poster in the campaign, which you may be walking down Federal and you look in the windows of Joe Max there and you might see your poster there someday. Okay, so we're effectively building you into the campaign. That is, of course, not mandatory. If you want to opt out on that, that is fine as well. But those posters will be marked with the in-place logo and can, if the media is available, direct people to your specific podcast. Okay, so there's a bit of an interactive presentation too as well. So, any questions on the podcast? It's fun. I'm a good conversationalist. There's a few people here that can attest to that. But at any rate, if there are no questions, I can happily take those later. But I'd like to introduce Killian, Kristen, right? And Terry, because I have only met you a handful of times. So, yeah. Come on, guys, and they'll detail their background and go from there.
So, what we wanted to talk with you about just tonight, briefly, are a couple of things. One being that in the guidelines you probably saw a map of priority sites, and we just want to talk a little bit about what makes the priority sites priority. Sorry, I don't mean to. We think that a priority site for you is a site that makes sense for your project, but there are some particular key sites that have emerged from various planning processes in the city, including a charrette that Kristen ran here in Youngstown last fall. And so we just wanted to really quickly show you a few of these, just as a way of getting you thinking about why some areas might be great places for you to plant your project. Do I advance? Could you advance?
Next.
We did link to this, but this is the final report from the work that our graduate students produced last fall. And if you guys haven't seen this, it is linked on the issue in the project guidelines. It's the CUDC final report. So you can flip through this. This has just some of the urban design ideas that came out of a weekend-long workshop last October. And some of the sites that we examine in here, if you'll read, some of the things on this map haven't happened yet. That's because they're ideas that came out of the charrette. So if you're looking at the map and you're like, there's a greenway on Crab Creek? Not yet. We hope someday. So you can check that out in here and double check.
This map is the one that's in the guidelines. I like the topography of this screen. It's easier to look at up close. Do you want to advance to the next one? And actually, Dominic, would you mind just talking a little bit about this and the priority sort of zone in the downtown area and the way that you all can begin to think about private properties as well as public spaces?
Yeah, so as a part of the design charrette, one of the main planning priorities that the students and the faculty at Kent State University and Cleveland Urban Design Collaborative were charged with was linkages and connections, as you'll see in their report. The main link being between the university and its center as an institution and employment center and education center, and the downtown business district and its center for business and entertainment. This area is identified by the students in the charrette report as the ridge or the hill between Wood and Commerce Streets.
That's in red here.
Which is in red here. So that area we've noticed in the over 121 individual pre-registrations received a lot of attention based upon the map on the previous page, but identified in specific parking lots or private properties. And one of the things we'll answer more questions about after my colleague's presentation is working with or working in public space and working with private property owners, because we obviously can't just pop anything down we want to, wherever we want to, when we want to. There are mechanisms in place with the Planning and Zoning Department at City Hall. Some of those folks couldn't be here with us tonight, but they are tangential in this project support group process, and they're here to answer questions. So I won't speak on behalf of the city and their zoning department, but we're ready to help you guide, even if you pick a specific site in this area that's identified in red here, and point you in the right direction. So there will be a process associated with that depending on ownership of the property.
Excellent, thank you. Gianna, advance to the next one. There you go.
Sorry, guys.
So there's also a document that you have access to that shows some of these priority sites, one being that there's a lot of blank walls in Youngstown. Some of them are privately owned buildings, some of them are public buildings, but you know, as a canvas for ideas, there are a lot of opportunities, and so we're just picturing a few of them here. We go to the next one. Parking lots is another. There's a lot of parking in Youngstown, and if there are ways to enliven some of these surface lots with art installations and other urban gestures, you know, there's a lot for you to work with. The Market Street Bridge. When our students were here, they loved this space because it brings you right down to the water's edge. Obviously, lots of people travel along the top of the bridge, but the space underneath is a place that really kind of jumped out during the charrette process as a really special moment here in Youngstown. Here's one of the renderings our students did to suggest how it could be, you know, in the moonlight. So, we're going to go to the next. The other one that came up a lot was the way that the city touches the water, and people here in Youngstown may not be really used to getting close to the water because the site in front of Cavelli down to the Mahoning is, you know, kind of not used right now. But so one of the things that the students were showing in this drawing is an opportunity to frame certain views and focus people's attention on what you want them to see. And so if we go to the next one, just some images of ways to kind of illuminate and frame the water's edge, particularly in this moment while you know, kind of development plans are getting ready but not happened yet. So are there ways that, you know, things can happen here on the site as a way of building anticipation about future permanent development on the site? The Y line. Do you want to talk about the Y line?
Sure. So you'll notice the map covers actually quite a large geography. The focus area is a little bit more focused on downtown into the river, but when you start looking farther afield in this kind of more translucent area off to the side, you'll notice one of the ones over here that says the Y line. So again, this is another one of those things, doesn't actually exist yet. We'd love for it to happen at some point. Some of our students came up with the idea of reusing this bridge on the other side of the Mahoning, and transforming it with a very light hand into a usable public space. And after the High Line in New York, we're calling it the Y Line. This is the Youngstown version. So that was just some of the ideas that came out of the charrette. That's all the way over here on the map. Like we said, we have kind of a focus area in terms of if we only have a handful of projects, we'd like for them to have the maximum impact. But that said, if you find a really interesting place off the beaten path, like we did in this case, outside of this focus area, and you make a strong case for why your project would do really well there and would really enhance that area, we'd totally be happy to see that.
It's not public space yet, so you'd have to think about the ways that people would be able to access it. Dominic took us out there, and it's not dangerous that much, but it would require, if you wanted to do a public kind of program or an installation, it's a very visible place. So, again, that's what the support team is for, is helping you begin to realize your ideas, and we'll work with you to see if there's a way, if this is a space you want to work with, a way to be able to access it. This is Crab Creek Corridor, which is, again, one of these kind of visible but invisible places in the city, so ways of, kind of activating the water's edge and also connecting to some of the green spaces in this part of the city. To Kristen's point, the more that we can concentrate projects together, the bigger an impact it's going to make. But there is something really unique about this part of the city, so we included it among the priority sites. Okay. I'm just going to go very quickly through a couple of examples just of projects from Cleveland that illustrate a point that's really, I think, important about the work here in Youngstown, which is that In Place isn't simply about nice placemaking gestures. It's also about finding ways to tell the stories of Youngstown and the linkages between your work and the work that RJ's been doing with podcasts and really capturing the voices and stories of people in Youngstown. So the two examples are both from an initiative we had in Cleveland a few years ago with much less funding than you have to work with, called Cleveland Stories, True Until Proven Otherwise. So one of the stories was told by an artist, Paul Truacki, who was from Milwaukee but had a residency in Cleveland. And he became really interested in this poet, D.A. Levy, who lived a pretty turbulent life in Cleveland. And so as a way of commemorating D.A. Levy, who's been kind of erased from the city's history in some ways, he talked about creating this memorial bike lane to acknowledge the life and cultural touch points of D.A. Levy when he lived in Cleveland in the 1970s. So if you go to the next, so it was really simple, really inexpensive. It was signage and also kind of verses from D.A. Levy's poetry on the pavement, which is what made the bike lane. D.A. Levy has his most famous poem. He talks about Cleveland as being a city he has to cover in lines, and so part of the work was to put the lines of his poetry in a place where people could read it as a way of connecting the east and west parts of the city. And there we are, on a very rainy night, we had a group of people. I think the D.A. Levy Memorial Bike Lane, or Damble, was actually ridden officially only just 2 or 3 times, but the memory of it persists, and it was a way of putting that story back into the city. The next one is another sort of sad story. Cleveland is sometimes hard on some of the creative people who live there, and so there was, in the 1970s, an African-American entrepreneur named Winston Willis, who is sometimes known as Cleveland's Black Rockefeller, but he isn't very well remembered. He's still alive. He had dozens of businesses in Cleveland at the intersection of Euclid Avenue and East 105th Street. So Cleveland SGS, which is an anonymous artist collective who work in Cleveland, decided they wanted to kind of resurrect the memory of Winston Willis during his lifetime and sort of some of the things he was able to achieve. So if we go to the next one. There he is with Dizzy Gillespie. He was a cultural entrepreneur. He had lots of bars and nightclubs and restaurants all kind of clustered together that were actually quite successful. But if you go to the next one, as kind of
this is what Euclid Avenue at 105th and Euclid looked like way back when, but by the 1970s it looked more like the next slide here, which was, you know, kind of both historic and lively, but also a little bit shabby. And this is where Winston Willis operated the vast majority of his businesses. And one thing that he did that really riled people up at City Hall and also in the major institutions was he had this big billboard that he would always put pretty inflammatory kind of things on it. And so if you go to the next one, eventually what happened to him is that all of his property was acquired by eminent domain and flattened. Go to the next, which is now kind of the Cleveland Clinic. And so he went bankrupt. He's still alive. He's indigent. But some of the things of his life that we can remember are the ways that, you know, he was extraordinarily entrepreneurial. He was able to create a lively street life that is pretty much lacking in the city now. And so this project was, at least in this part of the city, and this project was a way of kind of remembering the city that was, even though it has been largely erased. We go to the next one. So what Cleveland SGS did was they took some of the kind of graphic ideas and signage and businesses from Winston's empire and created these installations on a building, not in that same area, but just a little bit further to the west. And so here you see it. So for a brief period of time, there was this moment, this kind of memorial, but a memorial that was very much in line with Mr. Willis himself. And there's his portrait right there on the building. So if you go to the next one. So I guess all I'm suggesting here is that, you know, kind of there are ways of doing murals in the city, and there are also ways of kind of creating graphics and murals in the city that reflect historical or personal narratives. And so that's how these projects are intended to illustrate. If we go to the next.
Hi, my name is Killian Riano. I am one of the part of the support team. I am probably the only person that doesn't live in the larger area. I am coming to you from Brooklyn, where I live. There I teach urban design, architecture, and a whole bunch of things. One of the things that I wanted to talk to you about today is it's a couple of things. First of all, is to really put some things in a larger context. I think that's one of the reasons why I've been brought into the team, to see that this kind of effort, this kind of meeting, this kind of set of ideas are part of a much larger kind of almost global thing that's happening, where urban design, urban planning, urban thinking is getting, is both becoming a lot more democratic in some ways, and also is beginning to think about skills in different ways, is becoming more engaged in its condition. So yes, like Youngstown is both an incredibly unique place with unique set of challenges, histories, and opportunities. It shares something in that this kind of exercise is now being done in everywhere from, you know, Spain to Colombia to all over the place in Asia. So I'm here to talk a little bit about the themes that we're talking about, that we brought up, and then to show you a few examples of how they've happened. And one thing is that I wanted to make sure that if you haven't really looked at this, I wanted to really encourage everyone to go to the resources section on page 12 of the guidebook, especially digitally, because in papers, you know, you can't hit the links. It's not going to be very helpful. But that there's a lot of information here. We spent, you know, a few weeks collecting. Not only will you find incredibly, you know, cited and important, you know, this is where In Place comes from, right? Is this series of engagements that CUDC has been doing along with Madonna, YSU, etc. So very important kind of foundational information. But I also have added things, and especially in page 13, there's some projects for inspiration there that I really want to encourage you to just go take a look at while you're thinking and producing your project. It's 4 exhibitions, and 2 at the MoMA, the Museum of Modern Art, 1 by a group called Creative Time, which does public art in New York City, and 1 which was the Venice Biennale entry for the American Pavilion about 4 years ago. In each one of these, what you're going to see is not one, but multiple examples of the kind of work that we're talking about. Work that is urban, that is cited, that it comes out of conversations, comes out of narratives, it comes out of collectively figuring out what we can do. So I want to make you aware of that kind of library of incredibly interesting work. The hallmarks of this work is that it's being done by people that just start picking up a hammer for the first time, people that have studied architecture and urbanism their whole life, people that just kind of decided that they wanted to do something. So it blurs lines, both disciplinary, but also at all levels. Okay, so I want to go through these a little bit, and all I wanted to do here is to be able to explain to you. So this is the first project. So the first thing that you see in our, now I'm going to direct you to another page. Give me a second. The themes are in page 8. Okay, 8 please. Okay, so let's begin with wayfinding. This is one of the projects that is here. And you see here here now, new wayfinding and placement. So with wayfinding, the questions are what location should we highlight and connect in Youngstown? And I think it's also very important to say that these 5 points can be intermixed. But this is one that was done, which story is very similar to what the City of U is doing. We're collected, and some of the same stories were were folded back into the city, into its makeup, into its grids, into its sidewalks, so that people as they were walking could begin to come see it alive. Like this, you will see a few examples in this list that are similar, that take narratives from the city that can be hidden and bring them up. And those narratives can be personal, can be historical, or it can be environmental. Like, it could begin to mess with ideas here. It could be about how many cars fit in certain parking places, etc. Next. For the next one, which is mobility and parking, which asks the question of how do we move around Youngstown? And it also asks the question about this resource that Youngstown has, which is all these parking lots. What do you do with it? And one thing that I was having a little bit, because I think that when at first it was just parking, and then we began to talk about mobility. How do we move around downtown? Could we begin to have a small vision for downtown about pedestrians, bikes, cars, everyone kind of sharing some of these spaces? One of the things that has been happening all over the country with some success is these kind of parklets, where a couple of parking spots are taken over and parks are created around them. That's one possibility of what can be done with this project. Another idea could be to begin to create erasures of the street and the sidewalk a little bit. Or to take over some of the parking spaces. For lighting, this is the Illuminator. The Illuminator is a project that happened in New York City after Occupy Wall Street. A van and a projector started projecting different kind of hidden things that were happening behind buildings. So the lighting here, and the question that we're asking is how do we help others and ourselves see and feel safe and comfortable in downtown Youngstown? So there's the very pragmatic need of having better lighting. There's also the opportunity to use lighting in some of the ways that have been described before. Next. Then next we have technology. I wanted to show you this project because one of the things that and this is not so much the case in downtown Youngstown, but some of the industrial past has left behind a legacy that in this case, this is a project by Natalie Jeremijenko, an artist and scientist, that put these little lights on the Hudson River, and these lights technologically began to send apps, to send information to apps that told you what the quality of the water was like. So this is a case in which maybe a green technology project begins to get combined with an actual technology, an art project. It creates beauty, it creates delight, but it also begins to. So that's one way in which technology can be brought into. I mean, before, and this is high tech. There's also low tech. As part of my teaching, I've been working in Warren, Ohio for the last 3 years, training students. And one of the things that we do is quick kind of soil testing, and we try to create projects around that. The riverfront is a big deal. So actually being able to test that information. In one case, a student created a little project made out of little bits. I don't know if you have children that play with them, but they're basically technological Legos. You can create circuits, kids can create circuitry. So a student created a very quick thing out of little bits that would send information about the weather and the currents. So there's also an opportunity of understanding of how to get into the water, of the environment around us through these technologies. Next. For the green infrastructure, there are so many examples that I decided to put them all in. Another one of the things that these kind of projects have, a hallmark, is using ready-mades. Although, there's a little bit of money for these projects. This is a biosoil that was just put in the Gowanus area of Brooklyn. I don't know if you guys know of Gowanus, but it's the most polluted area probably in the country, where the water's green and it's pretty polluted. So some biosoils that have some technological, but really what they use is dumpsters, and they use things that were already available and began to put them in areas that people were thinking these were necessary. I think that's another one of the hallmarks of these kind of projects. They're easy to produce, easy to put out, and can use everyday materials in a completely different way. This is another project in the same area. This one just uses metal tubing to add some green infrastructure to it. This one is in Seoul, Korea. And I like this one because it was a public space project, a canopy, that has the map of Seoul, but then it gives you a little bit of information of the air quality in different areas, parts of Seoul on that day. I imagine, for example, here in Youngstown, again, some soil quality or water quality studies in different neighborhoods, and that's somehow being mapped as a public performance. And finally, this is there's a group of people in the Bronx, a teacher, that has been working with green walls for many years. And he's really brought in a passion for having things grow into schools. And through that, he's created extremely simple systems for the creation of green elements that can be placed in all over the place. Everything from green walls, these are green columns, and working with his students directly, so that now the students themselves have projects that they can continue to work on. And similar maybe to some of the work that RJ does, it's a little bit like student-led, but then it becomes a little bit of business, and there's a little bit of interesting thing there too. So I wanted to bring this one in because I think another one of the hallmarks of these kind of projects is that it's systematic in nature. It thinks about how can we bring schools into this project? How can we bring other groups and have a system that other people can be brought into, and that it's not only green infrastructure, but it's also an education tool, and it's also X, Y, and Z. So these are some of the projects that I wanted to share with you. I also wanted to make myself available. I mean, one of the things that we're here is to be mentors, to be just any questions, any thoughts, anything you may want to have. And my email address is in the pamphlet here, along with my name. So.
I think for the rest of the meeting, we just want to answer questions, talk to you. As Killian said, we're available to meet separately or just really begin to start answering questions. However you'd like to do it. Dominic, do you want to say anything else or?
No, I think, wonderful presentation. Appreciate everybody coming tonight. We definitely want to make the most use out of your time. It's 5:51. We have the room till 7. So, you want to make sure you introduce yourself to each other, our project support group. Like I said before, please, if you have a question about the site you're interested in proposing a project for, reach out to us ahead of time so we can get you the appropriate contact with the city, zoning department, or the private property owner, so that you're not wasting any time and you're keeping your proposal tight and we're being upfront on what is really feasible. Something RJ alluded to related to corporate sponsors. If you want to do that and use the city of U to incentivize, I think that's a great idea. This is one campaign for for the city, for the entire community. But do not be afraid to leverage your network and resources. If you have a project that would benefit from reaching out to a corporation or someone, whether it's electricians or plumbers or whatever it might be, please contact us. We do have a network to the Voters Association, trades. There's people out there that are interested in this project and maybe get registered as a free agent, so they're looking for a project where they can actually have an impact. They're not necessarily focused on creating a team, but if the project interests them, they're interested in teaming up with you and providing what is in their wheelhouse. So if you have more questions on that, just feel free to pull me aside, but definitely want to take time to get off of this live stream, RJ. And
say hello to Planet Earth.
Questions, so.
Yeah.
And I'd like to see the young people in the audience too. That's awesome. Thank you.